This is When I Grow Up with Paul Glazby.
So, the Tidy Boys, how are you doing?
Hello, Paul.
Very well. It's been a while.
It's been a while. It's been far too long. What I found through doing this podcast with the Hard House fraternity has been what I found interesting, especially with people like Steve Hill, E&M, Andy Farley, Rob Tessera, is the people, and obviously this will be the same with you guys, that were in the scene before there was a scene. Do you know what I mean? Like I came along and the scene was kind of there, and then it just went through the roof in the early part of my career. But you guys were there before that, and I found it pretty interesting. You know, like speaking to Ian last week about his, what he was doing before Hard House was even a thing. I mean, he still actually thinks that Hard House isn't a thing. He still calls it techno, but and the other thing I wanted to sort of get this off my chest at the beginning, because in life there's certain people that kind of shape who you are and the directions that you go in and stuff. Like for me, the big people were like Ronnie, who was my boxing coach when I was in my teens. Obviously Tom was integral in my journey because he gave me the big break, and my girls coming along has been a big thing. But having looked back 25 years later, you guys were a big part as well, for obviously with Tidy Management. But I think the direction that Vicious Circle went in, if it wasn't for you guys, I saw what you were doing, and Tidy was different to Triple, as good as Tidy Trax is and was as a label. It never did the things that you guys did as a brand, with the events and the albums and everything. And that really rubbed off on me. I saw what you guys were doing, and that's kind of what I wanted to do with Vicious Circle. So yeah, thanks guys.
So do you want to go back to the very, very start, to when we were little babies, or do you want to, should we start? Where should we start?
Well, I'd be interested to know, because obviously Andy, we know what Andy was doing before with the come on everybody, come on everybody.
Yeah, I was a child protege, Paul.
Yes.
Wasn't it?
Yeah. I've got a funny story about that in a minute as well. But Amo, what were you doing? What was your sort of journey into Hard House?
Well, I suppose my journey was probably a little bit more Hard House than Andy's. I mean, Andy came in from the left, and I came straight up from where Hard House came from. And this is when I start my where did Hard House start theory, because me, Tony DeVee and Andy Farley and E&M were all playing in the gay clubs in the UK in the 80s, and that's where Hard House came from. There's no denying it. It came from the energy of Hard House, came from the high energy of the gay clubs of the 80s. So we were all on the same path, me, Tony, Andy and Ian. Only difference was I was the only straight one amongst them. But so we all went down the same path. And so I suppose I started DJing in 1982, DJing in gay clubs in 85, 86. So that's where I started. But I always wanted to be a DJ. And then by the time I got to the mid-80s, when I saw what DMC were doing and I saw what Master Mix was doing, and this is where me and Andy eventually meet, I wanted to be a remixer and a mega mixer. I enjoyed mixing records together. So I suppose I wanted to be a mega mixer first, and that means mashups and putting tracks together. So I enjoyed the art form of mixing. And then I wanted to be a remixer. So I came through that, and in 1989, I bought my own studio for £10,000. I took a bank loan out, pretended it was for a new kitchen, and then I got my own studio in 89. And then this is where me and Andy cross over, I suppose, is because I wanted to get my mixes on the Music Factory Master Mix DJ service, which was a DJ only mega mix service, and Andy Pickles' dad set that up with Andy Pickles in 1986, and then eventually to cut a long story short, I did get some of my mixes on Music Factory Master Mix, and that's where me and Andy met through production in about 1990/91. He had obviously had the successes he'll tell you in a moment with Jive Bunny, which was 3 number ones by the time he's 19, whereas I was probably, so he was doing the pop stuff and I was doing the underground gay CD nightclub. And what happened to High Energy, it turned into house in 1986. House merged then with what we call rave and techno, and then if you merge it all together, by the time you get to sort of 92, 93, you've got this European techno house high energy that nobody knew what to call. And then by the time it got to 94, some people decided to call it hard bag, which me and Handy both didn't like. And so we jumping forward, laid claim to giving it a proper name. And in 1996, we called it Hard House. And we, Tidy and us, were the first people to actually label it commercially on products as Hard House. Nobody had ever done that before. So that was my journey, and that's how me and Andy met. But when we met, we did Hyperlogic, but that's a different story. Probably your next question.
Well, Andy, just jump in and give us your, just for anyone that doesn't know.
Very different story. I never set out to be a DJ, unlike Amadeus. Going back to your original point about your sort of influences and inspirations, I suppose my dad was the guy that gave me the opportunity and inspired me. So I left school at 16, couldn't wait to get out, and I had a choice to either follow my dad's passion for music, because he was a songwriter, singer, just for his own sort of pleasure, but he was a businessman, electrician, had electrical shop, so I could go and work for him in his electrical business and earn some proper money, or go and follow his dream. He had a little studio in Rotherham. He took it over. He used to go there and record his own songs just for his own pleasure. And the studio was going bust, so he literally bought the debt of this little studio in a council house, really, in a row of houses in Rotherham. And I had the choice to go one way or the other, and I chose to go that way. And so I became a tape op, basically, in this little studio, learning the ropes to become a sound engineer. So I went down the sound engineer route rather than the DJ route. I aspired to be Paul Weller. So as a kid, guitar, tried to form a band, doing a few cover versions, never really got anywhere with that. So I went down that route. So from the age of 16, I was recording rock bands and I'd started being a live engineer. So I was doing live gigs as well. So I can sort of, that's the way I went. Now, sat beneath all that was also, as Amos touched on, the Music Factory Master Mix service. So this is 1986, 87. So I then started as a producer doing mixes for the Master Mix DJ service. So whilst not a working DJ, I was working with a guy called Martin McSweeney, who taught me the sort of tricks of the trade with regards to mixing records. So that's where my sort of production DJ journey came. And that's where then the Jive Bunny thing happened. I was doing stuff for Master Mix. Les Hemstock did a mix called Swing the Mood for Master Mix, which was just for DJs. And it was my dad that said, why don't we rework this and, see if we can release it commercially. Never released a record before. I came up with the name Jive Bunny because it was a name I used to call my mate. It was just a nickname. And so we came up with Jive Bunny Records for a label to release this mix. Me and Les went and reworked it in the studio. It was my dad that said, well, let's go with Jive Bunny and the Master Mixers as the artist. And so that was 1989. We released it just on our own record label. It was called Music Factory Records. No major record label would touch it, thought it'd never work. And then consequently blew up and went to number one for 5 weeks in the UK, sold 1 million copies, and then went on to be number one. I think it was number one in Australia. It was number one in 13 countries around the world. So that's where the Jive Bunny thing kicked off. We had 3 number ones in late 89, 10 singles over a couple of 2 or 3 years. I think we must have sold, 10, 15 million records worldwide. So it was just blew up. I was 19, 20. And so, yeah, from the Jive Bunny, that's when I started meeting Amo around that time. And so Amo inspired me, really, and influenced me on my journey to become a DJ and follow the hard house route. So without meeting Amo, I'd never have, gone this way. I was the sound engineer producer. So that's when I then started DJing in the early 90s, just doing clubs like, general sort of nightclubs and such like. And then, we started working together in that early sort of 90s, really. And that's how we came together. So that's kind of so I'm more of a guitar rock guy, but then I found my way into hard house and dance music through Amo, really.
Right. So we can blame him.
I can blame him, yeah. I'm a soul boy at heart. I'm a sort of an 80s soul guy, so I'm masquerading as a hard house guy. Oh, I do.
Well, I'm a heavy metal guy, and I masquerade as a hard house guy. So yeah, I feel you. So the Jive Bunny. So the story I wanted to tell when when did the first Jive Bunny come out?
It was July 1989.
89, right?
Yeah.
Because that I think. Well, I don't know if it was the first one or one of them, but it was the second 7-inch record that I ever bought. The first record I ever bought was Morris Minor and the Majors, Stutter Rap. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And then the second thing I ever got was one of the Jive Bunnies, the 7-inch.
The first one was like it was the Glenn Miller one with all the rock and roll. The second one was Hawaii 5-0.
Oh, it would have been yeah. Was it Swing the Mood?
Swing the Mood was the first one, yeah.
Yeah, it was that. Yeah.
What a lovely story, Paul. I'm quite honoured that I was your second 7-inch single.
Yeah, there you go. You see, I don't keep it in the bag anymore, though.
It still generates royalties. Funnily enough, it still does very well out there.
Well, I'll tell you. So Michael, who I work with, he can't believe that I still get like royalty statements for. Well, I mean, obviously for everything, but like Kick It and Hostile, they're the two that still. I mean, we're talking like a. We're not going to retire from the. I mean, maybe you could from yours, but yeah, he's just blown away that stuff I did 25 years ago. He's like, you still get paid for it. I'm like, yeah. And I've just remixed Kick It as well, so that's going to come out this year. We'll keep ringing that wet rag until it stops. But so obviously, early 2000, everything blows up because you guys. I mean, I remember the first Tidy Trax that I remember that sticks in my mind was E&M remix on. Which one did you do first? What would you like to hear again? That was the first one you did. Is that right?
Yeah. What would you like to hear again? And then we did Black is Black, Dreamer, and Annihilation on the Trade EP. We're all probably a similar time. Yeah, around about 98, I think.
98. Yeah.
Was the time, yeah.
That's what I would. So that's when like I was learning to DJ. That's when I was, and I remember I used to play that all the time. And Black is Black, I still play that now. That's always makes it into the set. So amazing that all that was happening. And then obviously for me, like Insomniacs right at the beginning of 2000 is when I started Insomniacs, and obviously everyone knew who you guys were by then, and then because you used to play Insomniacs fairly regularly, and then obviously Hard House, because I was saying this to who was I talking to last week? Oh, it must have been Ian, and I was saying about how Hard House almost broke through in like 97, 90. Well, basically when Tony DeVee died, it seemed to take a step back for a couple of years. I don't know what your thoughts were on it, but I remember we used to go to see Tony DeVee at Gatecrasher, and he was starting to bring it through into clubs like that. But then when he passed away, it sort of dropped back a bit, and then had the big surge in 2000.
Yes and no. I think what happened is they always say in life things come in waves, and it's all about timing. And a lot of things happened. We started the label in 95, but probably for the first 2 years till 97, it took us a while to get going. We didn't have many releases out. I mean, if you look in '96, there was probably only about 6 or 7 releases out. So we were slow to get going, and it wasn't until '97 until we met Ian and well, I'd known Tony for a while, but you know, I think the Ian and Tony and the trade thing propelled us. Me and Andy used to go to trade, and we got to know Ian and we got to know Tony. And I think when Tony passed, it was almost flicking a switch of, because he was about to become the #1 DJ. He was on every magazine, everything. So he was literally at 40, about to hit big time the peak of his career. And Tony had been working like me since '84, and he'd done mobile discos and weddings and stuff. So he'd really grafted, and unfortunately got to the age of 40 when he passed. And what happened was, you're right, he brought the sound of trade and that underground London hard sound and put it into Sunday Essential and other commercial clubs. So it was Tony that took it out of the actual the underground gay scene and put it in the straight clubs and brought it to the masses. We obviously, planets aligned, and we did Tony's very last track, which was The Dawn, which was for the trade EP. And then when he passed away, for me, I'm the opposite. I think when Tony passed away and The Dawn came out, and that sort of '98, and we just signed Signum, What You Got For Me. I think '98 was literally lighting the touch paper for Hard House. And I think the remnants of 2000, what you're talking about, we saw it boom in '98, and it just got bigger. And I always say the 7 golden years are probably from '98 to 2005. And those are the 7, and everybody has 7 golden years. The Beatles had 7 golden years. Everything has 7 golden years. And I think that was the period.
Okay. Well, like I said at the beginning, like getting other people's insight, because for me, like I came into a scene that was already there, whereas you guys were you were making the scene. Do you know what I mean? So like hearing your perspective on that, because it really seemed to me like it boomed in, which obviously it did boom in 2000, but you saw it because I was still learning to mix in '98. You know, like I'd just got my decks and I'm, you know, clattering around trying to work out how to do it all. So then to hear you, because you were there, so then
well, I think Andy will probably back this up, but I think most of the Tidy's biggest record sales on vinyl were probably from '98 to 2001, and I think Tidy was the biggest selling independent vinyl record label both in '99 and 2000, and Nucleus were doing the same. So I think you'll find that the biggest selling records were from '98 to 2001, Andy.
I think that period, we set the label up in '95. That period, dance music was emerging. You know, you'd got great labels like Positiva, FFRR, Manifesto. So you got all these great labels that were just releasing great dance music, and so Hard House was amongst there, but it wasn't as segmented as it became. You know, so it was just great dance music, like Hyperlogic, Only Me. We released that on London Records. I will tell you the date, but it was a Hard House record, but predominantly it was just a dance record that was of the time ultimately. So I think that period of time through with Positiva and such like, Tidy sort of slotted into there because our first release was quite mainstream, Handbag, as you found out. So it was just a period of dance music was just coming a little bit more uplifting, a bit tougher, and obviously to the 2000s when the hard trance exploded with the likes of Ferry Corsten. So it was that period, '95 to 2000, was where dance music was just really emerging, and Tidy was part of it.
Yeah,
but I think just to put in there the big catalyst, you know, it's all right me talking about '98 to '99 to 2000, but just to be relevant now, the Orange Euphoria mixed by Lisa Lashes, which came out in 2000, November 2000, for a lot of people was the start of Hard House for them. That CD or that cassette of when it came out, that was what every young teenager had in the bedroom and was playing. It was a massive selling album, did about 500,000 copies. TV advertised, so you're watching Coronation Street, and halfway through there was this orange glow, and it just said Hard House Euphoria, mixed by
Yeah.
Lisa Lashes. And that one album took it from what was underground to the mainstream. So you're probably right, Paul. 2000 was there's some little markers, isn't there? There's that, like I said, 95 we started. 98 for me was the sort of the growing boom, but the big explosion was 2000 with Hard House Euphoria mixed by Lisa Lashes.
I mean, I remember that coming out. She went into the stratosphere after that, because obviously the Tidy Girls EP was March 99, I reckon, something like that.
Well, we did it. I think it came out in May 99, about then. Yeah, but
May,
we'd obviously
right.
produced it. We'd produced it probably 4 or 5 months earlier. So back end of 98 when we started producing, because me and Andy helped produce that with Paul Janes. So we were all involved in that big EP.
Yep. So that's 2000. Fast forward to the next year. I wanted to sort of point this to you, Andy, because you were, I was sort of dealing directly with you on this. So when it was supposed to be an Insomniacs album, and then for whatever reason it didn't, and I was sort of invited to do one of the discs on that album, but then for whatever reason that didn't eventuate. But then you carried on with Insomnia, and to this day, and we may as well talk about it in front of whoever's going to listen to this, I still don't understand why. I got a call from you one day saying it's, you know, the Insomniacs album's not happening, and I'm just waiting for you to say, so sorry mate, you know, it's not going to be going ahead. But then you were like, but we still want you to do the other disc. And I still don't know why, because at that time I wasn't on. Tidy management was all being put together, but I wasn't, and we'll come to this in a second. I wasn't on Tidy management. I hadn't been asked to be on Tidy management, but you still got me to do that other disc. And I don't know why.
Amo's generally got a better memory than me on these sort of things. I seem to remember from a business perspective, we got into probably a bit of a tangle with Tom over from an Insomniacs perspective. I can't remember exactly why the album changed course, but I seem to remember there was some sort of difference of opinion. Maybe there was a commercial issue around using the Insomniacs name, so hence Insomnia was born. Do you remember, Amo, what occurred?
I think you're half right there. There was that discussion, and I think the overriding reason it changed. And I remember with Lee Haslam, who worked with us then, I think what we decided was, what happens if this is going to be an album series and we're going to take it and we're going to go with it? What happens if Insomniacs stops, or what happens if that not, because it was only a night. It could have carried on forever. It could have stopped. And I think we just wanted to play on the Insomnia thing. I also think the track with Faithless was a big track. So I think I don't think it was anything sinister. It was just a commercial decision to have Insomnia as a wider name without the Z. We didn't get into any copyright problems with Tom.
Yeah.
It probably had longevity as just the word Insomnia. But the reason we wanted you involved in it was because obviously you were coming through and on the crest of a wave as well. And we were always at Tidy looking out for the new talent and people to be who are relevant. Obviously, Eddie Halliwell is one that springs to mind, where we picked him out of a club in Manchester. So I think you were right time, right place. And you were the perfect fit. And because the Tidy Boys were mixing one side, and as you know, we were more diverse in sort of sound, so we would add a slightly earlier set and slightly commerciality of Hard House, then you would finish it off like you would do in any night. So I think the balance between Paul Glazby and Tidy Boys looked a good proposition on paper.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, just like I said, at the time, I couldn't believe it. And then 25 years later, looking back, I'm still like, why did I still get the chance? You know, it just didn't, because it was only because we were doing the album and I was in and out of the office. She's going nuts on me. We were in and out of the office, obviously, doing stuff with the album. And at the time, you'd got Mark Gray, Jez and Charlie, obviously Lee Haslam. Who else? I'm sure there's somebody else. But, the Tidy management was being put together. And I just said to you, Andy, one day, I'm like, mate, is there a reason why I've not been asked? Because I think I kind of fit into this group. And you just turned around and said, well, you're exclusive with, it turns out he's now your manager all these years later. You're exclusive with Barry. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And then you were like, Haslam. And that was it. Boom, done.
Really?
And
yeah, the interesting thing with Tidy, there was never a plan. It was started off with, me and Amo wanting to have our own label, which was driven from frustration being signed to London Records as Hyperlogic. We just got super frustrated. So it was my dad who said, why don't you just start your own label? And hence Tidy Trax was born. But there was never any master plan around the DJ agency, events company. I remember doing our first event, which was at the Mezzanine in Wolverhampton, which was, I think it was our 5th birthday, wasn't it, Amo? And we had no experience, no idea whatsoever, and people queuing around the block. So
I remember that night.
Yeah, it was a phenomenal night. So we just evolved, and the agency just evolved. And because as a label, we see the talent coming through, and so it was about providing that platform for people like you, and you were the man of the moment right then. And so we just never sat down with a plan and said, let's do a DJ agency. It just emerged. And then it was like, Sunday Central residents, clubs like Sunday Central, Insomniacs, where you guys were the residents, and it felt like the natural thing to do. And as Amo said, even like Eddie Halliwell, we played Synergy in Manchester and thought, who the hell is this kid scratching it up? So it was a natural progression for us to launch the agency. And it built quite nicely, really. We had some significant talent on there, and it went on for quite a few years.
It was amazing, yeah. And I mean, I think if Mark Foster had not ended up getting his own success, it probably would have. I mean, I think looking back, was it because he was kind of going off on his own DJ sort of journey that it was like, is that why it moved to?
And I think, it was. I think certain things happened. For example, it's like Eddie played for us at the Weekender recently, and he always sort of holds us in high esteem, because at the time we were predominantly a record label that became an events company with a management company, but there were management companies exclusively who did that, like Barry, etc. And so people like Eddie eventually, I think he signed with Jules. I think he did Jules Everett Agency at the time, and at the time I remember Eddie coming to us saying, look, I've got this opportunity to go this way to a bigger agency. And we never stood in anybody's way. So even though we had a contract with Eddie, I just went and ripped it up and said, mate, you need to do what's right for you. So we weren't first and foremost a DJ management company. We were a record label and events company. So the likes of Lisa Lashers and Eddie Halliwell and others, we just never stood in people's way. So that's why even like a few months ago at the weekend, Eddie's like, mate, I'll always remember coming in your office that time and saying, look, I've got the opportunity to sign here. And we went, fine, go do it. So maybe that's why the agency, it was never our core business. Weekenders took over, Tidy events became big. And there's always a balance between so many things you can do, and you need the right people. And you're right, Mark Foster was pivotal to that. Johnny Dangerous was pivotal to it. And Mark became the Trophy Twins. And so I think naturally it just sort of saw its course.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I use that story about, always, because if I had not said to you, mate, why am I not being asked? Then I don't know where things would have ended up. It was only because
I strongly believe that, you have to go chasing your own opportunities. You can't sit back and wait for it to happen. You got to kick doors in, ask questions. A lot of people just wait for it to happen. And so I'm a big believer in you create your own opportunities, and if you don't go out to bat, you're never going to score, as they say. So I think that's it's always for me been a really important thing that I always encourage people just to go kick doors in, and if someone says no, ask again, and eventually you'll get there.
Yeah, definitely. Excellent. Well, talking about the Weekenders, so I don't want to talk about the latest Weekender because I feel like I missed out massively. Let's talk about how they all started, because they were like well, I mean, people will remember the Weekenders until the day they die. I think anyone that was there, I still. But it wasn't just the event, you know, like the DJ sets. It was the whole thing. And this is the thing about you guys is I can still remember. We'd go to into Rotherham and we'd do all the filming for the Tidy TV. And I mean, you guys are like the two Ronnies or the, you know, like, take your pick from, because I know you've got big influences from like the 70s comedy stuff. Is that right, Emma? I mean, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. I was brought up on 70s comedy and Morcambe and Wise and
Morecambe and Wise. Yeah.
We always used to say me and Andy were the light entertainers for the harder generation. I think, maybe my love of retro TV. Also, I think we've never taken ourselves seriously. I think when people ask me how come Tidy's lasted so long, I think, like Andy touched on there, we never had a plan. We always did a lot of things for a laugh, sometimes to the detriment of the business. But then sometimes I look back and think, well, if we hadn't done Tidy TV, I think there's a big part of Tidy's history missing. Some people come up to me, there's a guy who works here called Jamie, and he can recite every Tidy TV sketch, what we did, and he knows more about Tidy TV than me. And he said with the Weekenders, Tidy TV was a very important part of the Weekenders. It was the fourth room, and it entertained people when there was only sort of three or four channels. So yeah, the silly little things that we've done with no monetary value have sort of made Tidy become what it's become a bit of a culture, because other labels, Nucleus, Tripoli, and all the others, they didn't have what we did with Tidy TV. We became characters. The brand became.
We gave it personality.
A personality. Now, if you look at Nucleus, a lot of people don't know who run it, don't know what was behind it. It looked like a business. Whereas I think me and Andy particularly me and Andy, we came through as the face of Tidy, and therefore people warmed to it because we were just being silly. And you had this mixture of serious, hard music with two guys pissing about, basically. And I think that juxtaposition worked really well. And like I said, me and Andy have never taken ourselves too seriously, and I think that friendly stupidity worked well for the brand, and I think it's a very important part, because what you're going to say is, didn't you come to a sex shop in Sheffield?
I've forgotten about that.
Yeah, that was part of Tidy Weekender 7, and I think there's some interesting sketches. And Andy doesn't like to talk about it, but because he's got a proper job where if some of those scenes surfaced on YouTube, he'd be in trouble.
Well, a couple of things I remember. There's two things that stick in my mind. One is there was a bit. I think it was. I don't know if it was you two. I'm sure it was you, Amo, and somebody else sat at a table, like just doing an interview, and then there was like a kid's like teepee or something in the background, and me and Lee Haslam said, let's get in the teepee and then we'll just emerge. And we sat there giggling like idiots for like 5 minutes and then just crawled out. And then and you were just like, what? I think I'm remembering that right. But
yeah, Tidy Weekender 2. That was on the mezzanine at Rotherham. Yeah, it was Tidy Weekender 2. We were filming for that, and it was Tidy's 7th birthday party. So we dressed the mezzanine at Music Factory as a kid's birthday party. So we had like a little bouncy castle and stuff, loads of birthday balloons and everything. So me and Andy introduced it, and I remember, we interviewed. I've still got all of every single scene. I've still got. Paul,
surely you should put that in like as a DVD, or like that would be amazing.
Well, yeah, we did do one DVD. I mean, I think we should, but I think there, like I said, some scenes would have to now be vetted.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some things in my business world now with investors and all kinds of stuff away from Tidy. Right. There's some questionable things, let's just say, that could embarrass me nowadays.
Okay. Well, I remember the one with Amo, and the question was, describe yourself in 3 words, and Amos, like in an instant, went 13 inches long.
Yes.
I exaggerated, Paul, because it's actually 9.
But what I'm saying is that's 20 at least 20 years, like probably 23 years ago, and I just remember it. You know, like it's little things like that, and that's what I'm saying. Or what you're saying is that it's that personality, those things like that, that made Tidy and Tidy Weekenders and Tidy events in general. Like it gave it the personality that I guess no other. Like I said at the beginning, a lot of what you guys did. It's not like I was trying to copy Tidy Trax because we were completely different. But a lot of the things that you did to sort of build the brand, I'm like, that's how you do it. And Nucleus never did it. Tripoli never did it. I can't even think of any other labels that would have.
I think it's given us our longevity. You know, if you roll back 20, 25 years, in particular with the London scene, I think we were frowned on because we didn't take ourselves too seriously. And labels like Tripoli and Nucleus, you know, Hard House was a serious thing. You know, it was, you know, dark underground. Whereas Tidy, we were always a bit slapstick. We'd like to have a bit of fun with what we were doing. But I think it's testament to where we are now, 30 years on, that, you know, there's a community of people that have grown up with this. And if you can't laugh at yourself, I think, you know, you sometimes come unstuck. But I think Tidy's always been underpinned by, you know, business acumen. You know, we've come from, and I go back to my father, you know, we've come from good foundations with the Music Factory that gave us the platform to build Tidy. So we got the creativity, you know, of Ammo. We've always worked well together because I've always been a bit more business focused, and, you know, Ammo's the A&R, the creativity behind it. Yeah. So, but all along, it's trying to be true to what we're about. We do like to have a laugh. You know, we've come from that Vic and Bob generation with, you know, the Tidy TV that we've done. So releasing music that we're passionate about, putting events on that, you know, have got just something about them. And so all the way through, it's just been having a little bit of a tongue in our cheek that just enables us to, you know, deliver what Tidy's about and stay true to it. And 30 years on, we just put 2,000 people back in a weekender, and those people have been on the journey with us. So I think it's testament just to the way we've done things over the years.
I think also, Paul, I think the difference, you know, we're comparing, you know, these other labels with Tidy. I think Tidy created a culture within Hard House. Hard House is a culture, right? But I think what Tidy did over the other brands, we created a mini culture within it. And so I have to send like orchestral versions of Heaven's Cry on a weekly basis to people either getting married or sadly dying and at their funeral. And we know that for a fact there's people that have got Keep It Tidy on their gravestones with the logo. So and people have tattoos. So I think the difference between maybe Tripoli Trax and maybe Nucleus is we created a culture because people met at weekenders. They fell in love with their partner. They went and had children. And we have been sort of like a bit of a storybook to their youth. And therefore, we have created a mini culture. And I think that's the difference between just a record label and a brand like Tidy.
I remember saying to, I don't know, it was one of you, and you should do Tidy your room, because I thought if you had wallpaper and duvet covers and fucking, like, people would have bought all that. Surely
we did duvet covers, Paul. We did.
Oh right, where's my royalties for that idea?
We did them in 2016 for Tidy Weekender 21 Superheroes Weekender, and we did a duvet set and pillowcase. I've even still got one in the loft.
Everything, chopping boards, aprons, you name it. Yeah, I have to control.
We even did Tidy oven gloves. That's how we put the. I could put the logo on my own shit and it would still sell.
Well, I'm glad it was a good idea. Yeah. So I saw your video, Amo, after the weekender, and you kind of looked like you were halfway between on the verge of tears and someone that's just seen a horrific car crash and they're in shock. You know, like I don't think you could quite believe how well it had gone. What now we're a few weeks past it, like what's the reflection like?
Yeah, the last weekender, which was Tidy's 30 weekender, we did it at Park Dean and not Pontins, and I think it why I was sort of at the time emotionally happy was because there's a lot of things that happened, and Andy will explain the financials. Since 2020, we had 2 weekenders cancelled, then Pontins went down on us. We were about 120 grand in debt. We were literally, Tidy was on fire since COVID, and it's been a hard work to keep things going. And I think what the Park Dean did when we had no home, we had a lot of people want to go to a weekender. The Park Dean weekender got us through a very difficult time. And on top of that, it turned out to be one of the best weekenders ever because it was at a new venue that was clean, tidy, exciting. And so a lot of emotion poured out that I think we got over a difficult time. And also, everybody said, 23 years on, it was their favorite weekender. So that's why I was, like a rabbit caught in the headlights. But as Andy explained, the last 4 or 5 years have been tricky to get over, I think, Andy.
Yeah, it's like in many businesses, particularly in the entertainment sector, COVID just, pretty much wiped so much out, didn't it? So, yeah, it was thankfully having other business interests enabled us to power through. We had to refund like 100 grand's worth of tickets, and when you're refunding tickets, you don't get back on all the credit card charges that come with it, and all the stuff that you spent on promoting the event. So yeah, it was very tricky, and credit to the Tidy community, because a lot of people did keep their money in for nearly 2 years with us.
Right.
And so it was a hard slog to get to where we got to, and yeah, that particular weekender, it was a new venue. It'd been a long time coming, different part of the country. I don't think it could have gone any better than it did, really. And you see a lot of the same faces, but what's nice with the weekender, you're now seeing the kids of some of the Tidy community who met at weekenders, had kids, and these kids are now like 20 years old coming to the weekenders. So yeah, amazing.
Well, talking about kids, Max is Max about 35 now?
No, he's 31.
31, right? Okay, I wasn't far off.
Yeah, 31. What do you want to know about him?
No, well, I mean, is he doing all right?
He's doing all right. Yeah, he's had a journey a bit like me, music production, bit of DJing. He didn't really enjoy DJing; he preferred music production. He's done some work for Pure Energy Go, which is a business that maybe Andy will touch on in a moment. So he's created some license-free music fitness. He still does stuff, but he's not. Hard House was only a small part. And the one thing that Max did better than me, he can do house, drum and bass, techno, EDM. So he's a much broader producer than me. The only thing with my son, if he's 31, but he still thinks he's 19. So he's still he lives in Leeds with me, and he's still going out partying like we did back in the day. And I keep saying to him, you're going to have to stop. So at what point do you stop thinking you're 19? So,
well, to be fair, he's got you as a dad, so.
Well, yeah, I suppose so. Although let's put it this way, although we've been around for a long time, one thing that me and Andy have done, and probably another reason Tidy's still here, yeah, we've been out every weekend and we go clubbing, but me and Andy are the cleanest guys in pop music. We don't and never done drugs. I've never took a pill. I've never put anything up my nose, apart from a lollipop stick. But other than that, we party in a professional way. Whereas, let's put it this way, my son parties like a 19-year-old. So, yeah. So he's having fun. He's having the time of his life, he would probably say. But at some point, he's got to do what you do, Paul. Get serious, get a shirt on, and do something sensible.
Yeah, that's right. And what about your kids? You got 3, is that right, Andy?
Yeah.
Remember right? Two boys and a girl?
Yeah, in fact, me and Lisa are at a nice transitional period of our lives. So we've got 3. Bradley is 24 this year, so he's 23. He's just moved to Manchester literally last week, so one's gone. Alexander's birthday yesterday, turned 22. He now lives in Leeds. So 2 have flown the nest. And Sophia's, she'll be 18 in July. She's just, next week, she does her final A-level papers, and then she's done. And she'll be off to Newcastle University. So it'll be just me, Lisa, and the dog in this lovely house we've got. Yeah, next phase of our lives.
Because I remember, I think Lisa, I think you guys were pregnant when we were doing the Insomnia album. That would be about right, wasn't it? 24 years, 2001.
Yeah, well, we got married in 2000, and Bradley was 2001. So
yeah.
25th wedding anniversary this year.
Wow.
Getting old.
Congratulations. I must admit, when you were saying about the cleanest guys in Hard House, I always used to, you remember when Morcambe and Wise used to be in bed together?
Yeah, that's us.
That's how I always imagine, you know, like if you finished a gig and then you two were just with you.
Well, we did a sketch pull for Tidy TV in Sheffield, actually, and it was called At Home with the Tidy Boys. I think it's on YouTube, where because that's what people thought, we actually did a whole sketch where me and Andy lived together, like Morcambe Wise. We shared a bed. Gay Darren was our butler. And in the afternoon, Rob Steer would come round for a pot noodle, and we would practice dancing to Heaven's Cry. So we have actually spoofed ourselves to people thinking that we live together like Morcambe and Wise.
Amazing. There's a couple of questions that people have. So if you don't mind, I'm going to hit you with these. I should have probably sent these to you before, so you could
go for it.
We'll do it off the cuff. So Marco wanted to ask, other than Tony DeVee, who's made the biggest impact on the Hard House sound?
I think there's a couple of ends of the spectrum. I think the Sharp Boys, we would always say that inspired us very much around like the Untidy dub sound. So we're big fans of that sound. So I'd say the Sharp Boys were quite pivotal in the Hard House.
They're making a comeback, aren't they, at the minute? I keep seeing them pop up on Instagram. Is that right?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, we've put some music out for them actually on their label. I think Andy's right, Sharp Boys, but I think that the biggest influence would be Baby Doc, because it's Baby Doc influenced Tony DeVee. Tony DeVee would DJ, hear some of Baby Doc stuff, and then he'd go back to the studio with Simon Parks back into Birmingham, and he would say, I want this track to sound like Baby Doc. So Tony was influenced by Baby Doc. And what happens is we all get influenced by somebody, Paul, and then we get it slightly wrong, and we create our own sound. So I think Tony created his own sound based on wanting to sound like Baby Doc. So I would probably put Baby Doc as one of the biggest influences for Hard House.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've always, for me, Paul King and Baby Doc, they were like almost level pegging in terms of, obviously Paul did a lot more stuff, so there was more to go at. But yeah, just amazing. Yeah. Okay, good answers. And then Ed Croft said, what would you be doing if it wasn't music? Maybe you can tell us what you're doing, Andy.
Well, everything I do is involved in broadly music, but the business that's my main business now is called Pure Energy Music, which is music and fitness, because my two passions are fitness and music. So that business is growing quite fast. We provide, because what we did was music costs a lot of money to play in gyms, particularly in the UK in group exercise classes. So what I did about 4 years ago, we started creating a catalogue of really high quality music, from drum and bass through to chill out music, that we own the global rights on, so we could remove the cost of music in gyms. So we now have an app, Pure Energy Music. It's like Spotify for fitness. So it's all curated for fitness, whether you're doing studio cycling, yoga, high rocks, whatever it may be. So I think if I wasn't involved in music, I'd be involved in fitness. I did have a business, still do actually, in education, so education technology. So my passion, the core of what I do, is always music orientated. But if I was doing something else, it'd be in the fitness industry, I would suggest.
Me would be what I do. I suppose I'm a graphic designer, and I've done that since the mid-90s, graphic design. And so a lot of the Tidy stuff, all the Tidy sleeves, with exception to Tidy 2, all the Tidy sleeves, all the flyers, I've done myself. Self-taught graphic designer. I still do all the graphic design for the weekend for everything. I'd say probably 90% of everything that Tidy's done, I've actually designed. So if it wasn't for music, I'd probably just be a graphic designer, which is my other job anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And then I guess what's next for you got the big birthday coming up in September, is it?
Yeah, September the 27th.
Yep.
We're going back to our roots for that. We're going back to London, and a bit of a trade vibe. We're going to Egg in London at King's Cross, and it's a great venue. And we felt like for our 30th, we wanted to do something back to our roots, which was an underground club, and a very good one at that. It's got 3 rooms and an outdoor terrace. So, 30 years, we're going back to where we started. Like Andy said, in 2000, we started our first event in an underground club in Wolverhampton called the Mezzanine. And so, we're going back to, it's called Triple X, and that which stands for 30. And we're putting a spin on it. It's going to be a dirty 30 party. It's red and black. So we're adding a bit of a Rocky Horror sort of mild fetish sort of underground clubbing thing. So Egg, 27th of September, which is we were born on the 26th of September. So our birthday this year is on the 27th. So 30 years
and a day.
30 years and a day. So that's what we've got planned. We've also got we're going to launch tickets this week for Hard House Euphoria. It's 25 years since, as I mentioned, the Orange Euphoria came out. So we're going back to me and Andy's favourite venue of all time, which is the Opera House, which is the O2 Academy in Bournemouth. And we're getting Lisa Lashes and the old gang back together. And we're going to celebrate that 25 years of the Orange Euphoria in style. And that's on the 29th of November.
Right. It's all happening. And then I assume Weekenders are going to carry on at the new venue. Is that the plan?
Well, we're just looking at that now. So
there's a few options on the table.
Yeah, we're exploring different options really. And we've always said, like, treat every weekender as if it's your last weekender. We've been saying that for 10 years, I think. So we didn't plan another date. We just, because we didn't know how this one was going to go. So we wanted to do it, reflect on it, and then determine what to do next. So we'd like to do another weekend next year, but at this point we've not established any dates. So we'd like to think in the next month, sometime this month, we'll be able to announce what we're doing on that front. So Weekenders, and I think it's an interesting time right now, as we're all aware. The harder sound is just blown up with, it's quite ironic seeing all these superstar DJs from James Hype to Hannah Lane all basically playing the music that we've been playing for many, many years. So the harder sound now is being played to humongous crowds by superstar DJs who are effectively playing the music that we started 30 years ago. So I think it's an interesting time. We'll keep discovering and releasing new music. We may get back in the studio ourselves and do something. We keep threatening to go and do a Hyperlogic single. So, but my schedule gets somewhat busy with all the other business interests. So we'll just keep. I think Tidy's always gone with the flow. It's always been quite organic and quite natural. Unlike my other businesses that have business plans and investors and all that kind of stuff, Tidy just keeps flowing. And if it comes to a stop, it'll come to a natural end. But right now, I think we'll just keep doing what we're doing.
Well, it's worked for 30 years.
It has. It has. I think there's still life in us. We're still young at heart, Paul.
I'll tell you what, you two look. I mean, obviously, my sister says that I've had more body shapes than anyone she's ever met. Like every time I see her, because I don't see her very often now. She's back in England and I'm over here, and she never knows what she's going to get when I turn up. But you guys have looked like that for 30 years.
Pretty much. It's boldness.
Yeah, hard house keeps you young. Yeah, I think it's hard house that keeps you young. I think because we've always been bald and we've always sort of looked pretty much the same. I think we've maintained the same weight. We've probably stayed looked the same. A few people have mentioned that we've not changed, because you've got to bear in mind, like I said earlier, people when they were 18 going clubbing are now sort of married and probably divorced, and they when they come to a weekender, they're quite shocked to say, hold on a minute, 23 years ago, I remember seeing you two looking the same, playing Heaven's Cry at a weekender, and you're still doing the same shit and looking the same. So although they go away and have a full life story, when they come back, it's like, was I in a coma? You know what I mean?
I always remember being in St Kilda in Melbourne, and this would have been probably 2003, and Nick Sentience was there with his, I don't know if they're still together, but Nikki Sentience, like his missus. And obviously back, I was like, heavier, I had the skinhead, and we were sat talking, and he'd got into hard house kind of like a year after. He must have sort of come around sort of late 2001, 2002, and we must have been sat together in Melbourne 2002, maybe 2003. And so I would have been 25 at the time, and he was, I think they were like 22 or something. But because when they got into hard house, I was like a household name, so they just assumed I'd been around for years. So he thought I was like 35. I'm like, you cheeky twats, I'm only a couple of years older than you. But yeah, they just, their perception. I'm 47 now.
47, still a baby.
Yeah, and you look good, Paul. It's all right saying the Tidy Boys look good, but I think you look good as well, Paul. Either that or your camera's not very good.
So, yeah, we always put a filter on. Yeah, it's like an Instagram camera. But yeah, I think we're going back to what you're saying. The hard sound sort of, it's almost like I started this podcast just at the right time, because if I would have had no idea. It was only through talking to Alf Bamford, actually. He was telling me, he said, oh yeah, there's some guy, Patrick Topping, he was playing Hostile. I'm like, what?
Yeah,
just crazy.
Yeah.
But what someone told me the other day though is that all the new tracks are like 4 minutes long. They're all these like short tracks, and I'm like, well, I mix for 4 minutes. Like, that's no use to me.
No, the new tracks. Yeah, you got. I think we got Hannah Lane remixed. We Came, We Saw recently. Lisa Lesh's track, and it came through, and it said 3 minutes 20 brackets. That was the extended version. Jesus. So yeah, but what they do, Paul, apparently these young kids, they because they work digitally, they loop the 4 bars at the end and the 4 bars at the beginning, so they don't need an E&M 6-minute outro. Yeah, but that's what I love, you see. And I tell you what, I've recently I used to hate Oasis when I was, when they were out, like in the when was it, like late 90s, early 2000 or where I couldn't stand them. But as I've got older, and what I've noticed is that, because when I used to be in the studio with Maddox, he'd always try dropping bits, and I'd be like, no, let it run. Don't drop it out yet. Let it go. And we'd always have, not an argument, but we'd always have this backwards and forwards. And then, like that's how we do the tracks. And when I listen to Oasis, they let it run, like the bits where it almost sounds like it should drop out, but the guitar just keeps going over. And I've got this real appreciation now for Oasis. But if I went and played to this young crowd, they'd be like, what's all this about? This is going on a bit. But well, it's Oasis used to roll with it, didn't they?
Oh, nice.
Yes, they did. I know.
That was a joke. That was a joke there. Can you just put that was a joke? The new sound, Paul. It's brilliant that we're relevant again. Hard house was a dirty word, but we're relevant again. A lot of people are playing old Tidy tracks and old hard house tracks, like you said. The only thing is we've got to do as a business is make sure that we're relevant and we capitalize on that. And so we've had all these remixes done. We've just had all the Tony DeVee catalogue remixed by Patrick Toppin, Eats Everything, and Hannah Lane and all these people. So I think moving forward, to round it off, we have got to remain relevant. And what you were talking about, what's next for Tidy, like Andy says, we don't know. But I think one thing that I want to do, because I'm 60 now, is with Tidy, is to do different things maybe. So we talk about the weekender and we talk about clubbing. I think it would be nice to, I think we're at an age now where we can say, well, let's not do a weekender, but let's do an event in a windmill or a lighthouse, or let's do something absolutely crazy. So I think as you get older, you want to try new things. And so I think Tidy's policy moving forward would be, let's try something different rather than doing the same as what we've always done.
How long will it be before the bin gets replaced with a Zimmer frame on the logo?
Yeah. I know what you're saying there, Paul. But I'm going to go back to your previous question. Wow, I say you look so young. You've not changed.
Exactly. That's right. Well, guys, thanks for your time. I know you're both busy, and I really appreciate the hour that we've just had. But I also appreciate everything that you've done. Well, for the scene, but I mean for me as well. Like I said earlier on, there's some people, come along and influence you and help you along the way, and you guys, have definitely been that. Like a lot of the things that I do now wouldn't have happened if those things didn't happen, and they wouldn't have happened if you guys had not been there to support and put those opportunities in place. So thanks for everything.
Pleasure, my
friend. Thank you, Paul.
And
can I just finish by saying, if we do another weekender, will you play?
Book me in, boys. Book me in.
We've got him on camera. We've got him. That's done.
We got it on camera.
Excellent. All right, guys.
Cheers, Paul.
Cheers,
Thank you, Paul. We shall hold you to that. We'll let you know.
Oh, hold me. Yes. Perfect. All right, guys. Thanks very much.
This is When I Grow Up with Paul Glazby.